very much honored to have this wonderful opportunity to introduce, first of all, to myself, but also to the audience, those who, from where I sit, see as the next-gen leaders of the region. Frankly, both are only for the last several years in politics. But again, when I take a moment to see your CVs, I realized that when I grow up, I want to be Nataša, because there is one line in her wonderful career. She was doing different things in her life as a distinguished lawyer, communication specialist, both in the private and in the public sector, then someone who was taking care for public protection of personal data, appointed by the parliament, and now a president. What I've realized is you spend 5 to 7 years in whatever you do, you join the bar, and in 5 years you are a member of the steering board of the Bar Association of Slovenia. That was basically a wonderful thing that I've learned, and I'm super happy to have you here. Thank you very much also, President of Montenegro, for providing this specific opportunity for all to be able to learn about the both of you. I hope President Milatović will allow that I start with President Nataša, President of Slovenia, and Pirc Musar. I'd actually like, well, not even with the presidents, every question is agreed in advance, believe me. Therefore, I will start by asking you, believing that you are a new force for the region, as well as on your national political scene, what would be, in a nutshell, your political credo? What would you like to achieve in the coming several years as a president, but then onwards when it comes to Slovenia, and then getting back to the region? President Milatović, this will be the same for you as well. Madam President.
First of all, I would like to thank for the invitation to go to this very important summit for the region. And just to let you know, I'm a greenhorn, a rookie in politics, because when I became a president, that was my first contact with politics, and I was never a member of any political party, so it's a new field to explore. What do I want to achieve? It's probably $1 million question, and we all have to be aware that the countries which do have parliamentary democracies and not presidential democracies, for the presidents, it's really essential to know that we do not have the executive power, but what we do have at the end is the power of words. And some competencies, but not like, you know, the governmental competencies. So this is what we have to take into account. And what's guiding me through my new political life is one really very important sentence. I always, but really always, have it in the back of my brain. What's the difference between a politician and a statesman? The politician will work the way to win the next elections, and a statesman will work for the next generations. And honest to God, we do, thank you. And I do believe that also Europe, European Union, and Western Balkans, they need more statesmen and less politicians. That's my wish, and this is what I would like to do in the future.
Thank you very much. In all fairness, President Milatović, just a minute ago in his speech, was mentioning all levels of authorities in the country need to do this and that. Therefore, you've already showed to us that you are understanding what Madam President just mentioned, that it's not only about presidents. So coming back with the same idea, what would be your credo? What to expect from you and Montenegro in the coming several years, respecting complexities just explained by Madam President? It's not only about President, it's the whole government, it's the whole political scene. Please.
Right. Well, it's really an honor to be part of this panel and to have Nataša today in Montenegro, to also have the views from Slovenia, and you know how Slovenia is well regarded in this part of Europe as sort of an example, particularly an example when it comes to sustainable development. Yesterday we discussed that this year Slovenia is celebrating 20 years since its joining the EU as well as NATO, and it is really remarkable how the country has changed over those 20 years, and perhaps how the rest of the region of the Western Balkans have not really used those past years in the right way to the benefit of our own citizens. So this is why there is a huge difference today between the Western Balkans and the countries like Slovenia. So to answer your question directly, the reason why I have entered the politics in Montenegro is to bring Montenegro into the EU. It's as simple as that. And when I say it with that one sentence, what I also imply with that is to bring Montenegro closer to the European standards of the rule of law, to bring Montenegro closer to the level of the living standards of the EU, to bring Montenegro closer to the equality of opportunity which exists in the EU. And that's in a nutshell. This is, when my wife also asked me the question, why are we doing this? This is basically a very simple answer that I have. And indeed, it is not an action of one man. It is not an action of even one branch of the state authority. It should be the goal, the consensus of the whole society and of the whole decision makers within the society. I believe that currently, following certain changes that happened in Montenegro, we do have this momentum in the country where there is an honest will to change and to progress with the hope to reach this goal of joining the EU as the 28th member state as of 2028.
Well, thank you very much. It was a clear message. It's not only to bring Montenegro into the EU, but to make it a new member state in every respect. And that is what is important for the people. But look, let us be realistic. Can we hear a message of hope from you, Madam President? Because there is a lot of this and that in the public sphere in the region. Well, it ain't going to happen. Well, I'm super grateful to have former High Rep and a Dean of the EU College, Ms. Mogherini, because the sad reality is that we are losing faith. The citizens and the politicians are not necessarily happening. So can we expect something more and better? It is super important what the President has said. What can we get as a feedback from the EU member state President?
I will start with a beautiful dance called tango. It's a beautiful dance, but it takes two to do it. Being now the President of the Republic of Slovenia and looking what was done in the past for the Western Balkans to join European Union, I can easily say that Europe didn't do enough. We have to be honest to each other. But the heaviest burden lays on the countries which want to join European Union. They have to fulfill the conditions. When Slovenia was entering European Union 20 years ago, you have to believe me, it was not an easy process. We had to change the constitution. North Macedonia is now facing, for the second time, the same challenge. So it was a lot of debate whether, Europeans are going to buy all the Slovenian land and so forth and so forth. But looking from the perspective of 20 years ago and looking what Slovenia is doing today, I can say that there are more pluses than minuses entering European Union, and I firmly believe in that. If we compare the GDP 20 years ago of Slovenia, which was 17,000 euros per capita, and today it's doubled, it's 33,000 euros per capita, which is higher than in Spain, in Portugal, and in Greece. So we are really doing well because of cohesion funds, farm subsidies, and so forth and so forth. The war in Ukraine did change a lot, did change the momentum also inside European Union. We now, at least I do, I believe that the stability of the whole Europe depends on the stability of the Western Balkan region as well, and Ukraine and Moldova and Georgia. But the countries aspiring to enter European Union have to understand that the European Union has certain rules. One of the pillars of European Union is the rule of law. Without the rule of law, it's chaos. And if you see the situation in the Western Balkan countries today, they're really trying really hard. The champion among the countries in Western Balkan is Montenegro. I have to admit that. But if, together with the rule of law and implementation of all acquis communautaire to the national legislation, you're not going to fight against corruption, then the rule of law means nothing at the end. And also the old member states. We have to fight corruption on a daily basis. And just one more sentence, if you allow me. When Slovenia was entering the European Union 20 years ago, we had to transfer 80,000 pages of acquis communautaire. Today, the countries which want to enter the European Union, they have to transfer 95,000 pages of acquis communautaire. In the next coming years, it's going to be 100,000 pages of acquis communautaire. So it's getting harder and harder. But momentum is now. Charles Michel said at the Bled Strategic Forum, 2030, that's the last date that the countries need to enter the European Union. So European Union needs to adapt. How big is going to be the Commission? What are we going to do with the Parliament? The qualified majority vote is now in the debate. You know, Slovenia, my country, is the leader in debating the qualified majority vote together with Germany. So we have to do our job, and the countries in the Western Balkan, you have to do your job. That's the fact.
President, thank you very much for mentioning two things. One, Bled Strategic Forum and this wonderful statement given from the floor, basically, by President Michel. But I ain't going to insist on reminding you what was the reaction of the panelists afterward, because this was not one of the best panels of our leaders coming from the region. I was there and was very sad, but ain't going to there. But another thank you for pointing us directly to the rule of law, because this is not only your profession, my profession, but something President Milatović has also mentioned in his statement and now again. And I would like actually to bring you to this issue of rule of law from another angle. Look, in this first row and in few rows behind, I know that there are several investors. Some of them very much interested in investing in renewables in Montenegro, some others in mineral resources in the region. Speaking of rule of law, and in the context of the ESG Summit, is the government or the respective governments, your national as well, others in the region, able to follow and work closely hand in hand with investors, sometimes investing in sensitive areas? And we need them. And you are the economist here, not two of us. We need them. Can we work hand in hand with them? Are the governments able to insist on what the people insist on? Environment, well, respect for social rights, governance, but then again bring them in and facilitate this without corruption. Please.
I think that's a must. I'm not still sure, that's the fact, but that's certainly a must. And I remember before entering the country's politics, when I was an economist working for the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, there was this annual flagship report which the bank produced on an annual basis. And a very important one was created back in 2013 with the title Stuck in Transition. And what I, from this perspective, think was the case of Montenegro for a long time. I don't really want to speak of the wider region, but for sure of Montenegro, it was indeed stuck in transition. What I hope is
like
now
lost in translation. In this time, lost in transition.
Well, let's not hope that was the case, because what I believe now is the case that, particularly following the political changes of 2020 in Montenegro, the country has been unstuck. And now relating that to the rule of law matter, what has happened is that currently there is a political will of the political establishment to fight corruption, to fight organized crime, and really to aim, at least to aim to the better standards of the rule of law. Because ultimately the rule of law, the existence of the rule of law is the basis of a free market economy or a social market economy, any kind of market economy. That's the basis. And this is why it's so important to continue in that respect. But when you also zoom out a bit, and this is now philosophical, what is the needed ingredient for this process to be a constant one? Because it's a constant process. We always forget that democratic development can be reversed. It's not something which should be taken as a granted. It's a daily process of fostering the principles of democracy. And this is why I truly believe it's all about institutional stability, not about political stability, because governments come and go, presidents come and go. What is important is institutional stability, which would allow the private sector to have a predictable business environment without corruption, without vested interests, where the taxes would be predictable, where the environment would be predictable, where the plans, the spatial plans would be predictable. So this is ultimately what businesses are asking for, and this is hopefully what the governments will be able to work with them on.
Well, President Milatović, rule of law was one thing, fighting corruption another one, stability also, but what about the capacity of the government to work hand in hand with big investors? Come on, we are coming from small regions, small countries.
Yeah.
Some of these investors do have more money than our GDP per year, let's be frank, so to work with them.
If you want, I remember, again, from another exercise that I have done as an economist, trying to understand what were the factors behind the successful transition of different developing countries throughout the world. And what I have found 10 years ago, together with a number of my colleagues, is that there are three key factors for a country to succeed on its transformation from the point A to the point B. Those are political will. So politicians need to want to change. They need to want to go from the point A to the point B. That's crucial. The second ingredient is capacity. So basically, a society needs to have a capacity to go from the point A to the point B. There are different ways. So sometimes you need a capacity in the parliament in order to pass the laws that are, sometimes not really easy to be passed. You need to have a capacity to negotiate with the unions, with the employers' associations. You need to have the capacity to understand where you're going. And number three factor is you need to have a know-how. Sometimes smaller countries perhaps don't really have an accumulated know-how. This is where the institutional memory of different institutional partners is important. This is where also the EU accession as the most important external anchor as well as the provider of know-how is very important. And so ultimately, a successful story behind a country's development is a story where within one point of time, that country has all those three ingredients: political will, capacity to change, and know-how to change. It's not easy, and this is why we are not really seeing so many successful stories of change. And this is where I personally believe that we are lucky as a region to have the EU as the external anchor and as a guidance on helping us in all those three sectors.
Well, at the very end of a very brief conversation, I'd like to bring you back to where we are, the ESG Summit. Both of you are coming from Zelena, Slovenia, and then ecological state of Montenegro. So small countries, though countries which early on were aware on a political level as well as on the level of citizens how important it is to preserve what you have, the richness, the beauty. I like to say about Montenegro, it's a wild beast. Cannot say for Slovenia it's wild, but beautiful.
Sometimes.
So, therefore, can we get back to this the EU is underlined now by President. Well, the Green Deal was a big thing, and we are believers. You are coming from the countries that do believe. And then there was this green agenda for the Western Balkans. Can our societies be able enough to really look into the goals set in COP and go on the national level? How can you assist the process? What are the experiences you may share with us, Madam President, coming from Slovenia?
You know, asking a question whether we are capable of adapting to green agendas and climate change, that should not be a question. We have to, we must. We have to listen to science. I'm sometimes really very sad and desperate even to hear, you know, the theory conspiracists which do not believe in climate change, and they are mostly connected also to anti-vaxxer societies. So we have to believe the science, and I do believe the science. If the science is wrong, they will admit immediately when they realize that they are wrong. The conspiracy theorists will never admit that they are wrong. This is the difference between the two of them. When I was in Doha in February last year at the Least Developed Countries Summit organized inside of the United Nations, I heard some really very important and significant statistical data. Least developed countries are representing 25% of the global population and of all the members of the United Nations. And they produce only 4% of greenhouse emissions. When I had an opportunity to discuss with Sultan Al Jaber, who was the CEO of Dubai COP28 conference last December, he told me one significant number as well. He said that the G20 countries are producing 80% of all the greenhouse emissions. And between the G20 countries, we also have France, UK, Germany, and Italy. So 4 countries from Europe, 3 from European Union. But does this mean that the smaller countries should only wait what the big countries are going to do and do nothing? Ladies and gentlemen, this is not the case. Every single person, every single country needs to put a stone into this mosaic of fighting against climate change. And just to conclude, if you allow me, one story, which is a shocking one. Whenever I tell this story to the young people who are always saying me, Madam President, we have to do a lot to get good jobs and to buy apartments, but we cannot fight climate change alone without you who are in power today. The story is from North Siberia. I read it in New York Times just a couple of months ago. One farmer had a lot of deer there, 2,500 heads of deer. And one morning he arrived to the region when deer was eating grass. All 2,500 of these deer was dead over the night. And then the scientists from all over the world came to start the investigation. What the hell happened? And you know what they realized? Permafrost is defrosting now more into the depths than before because our planet is warming up. So normal was 4 meters in the summer. Today it's 6 up to 8, 9, in some parts even 10 meters of permafrost, which is getting warmer and warmer inside the soil of planet Earth. And what happened in North Siberia? 12,000-year-old anthrax woke up and came out of the permafrost. So this is the reason why the deer died. This is what's happening on our planet. And if we are not going to do something, it's going to be late, too late for the next generations. Every single country needs to do something. And sometimes I hear in Europe, you know, from the populist political parties, oh, green agendas and fight the climate change is very expensive. Yes, of course it's expensive. But we will have to learn how to live with less, but better. I'm not saying that we have to live in the future in a worse way, but we will have to learn to live with less. That's what I'm trying to preach. That's what I'm trying to learn myself and teach others. So that's my philosophy. It's very, philosophical. Then if you go to the technical parts, of course, there are this and this project and green agendas, as you mentioned, but every little step counts, believe me, every little one. Thank you.
So I'm getting an answer to my first credo question at the very end of the conversation. I'm very much grateful. President Milatović.
Well, I do want to remind you that Montenegro, in a way, was a pioneer of legislative efforts with respect to green economy transition, because back in 1991 we have proclaimed Montenegro as an ecological state. Today that's part of our constitution. Unfortunately, I think that we haven't really done much when it comes to implementation of what we have wrote in constitution. And there is a way to go. When you apart from the rule of law, when you compare different aspects of what we need to change and bring it up to the European standards, where we probably lag behind the most is the area of ecology and waste management, water waste management. So those are the parts and the bits of our society where an extra effort needs to be put in place. I am very happy that, for instance, last year we have pioneered another important thing when it comes to financing sustainable development. As a matter of fact, together with the UN, Montenegro was a pilot country which has created the so-called Acceleration Fund, which is now aimed to support and to finance everything which is related to bringing the 2030 SDG agenda in place in Montenegro, and we are very proud of that. I have personally put a lot of effort in working with the UN agency in Montenegro and as well as the government, obviously, of Montenegro. So Montenegro, in that regard, is now again sort of a pioneering country, and I'm very much hopeful that together with our international partners, this is going to be helping financing SDG agenda in Montenegro. And the number three, I think that a lot of things have changed to the better over the last few years when it comes to renewable energy and sort of the green economy transition from the coal towards the renewable production. This is where we are naturally abundant with natural resources. I think that the government has also done a good job in terms of providing business-friendly legislation, which is now fostering the whole renewable sector. So I'm an optimist that the country is on the right track, sort of following what we have put back in our constitution, that we are indeed an ecological state, and this is what we now need to also show in our action. I'm looking at His Highness the Prince of Montenegro, Nikola Petrović, who is also one of the pioneers of this green agenda of Montenegro, and I do want also to personally thank him for all the initiatives over the last 20 years, where perhaps the country was not really prioritizing that. Somebody in the country was always there to remind us all how important that topic is. So thank you again very much.
Well, personal note, what we have heard was two yes we can statements. Yes, we can do more to join the EU, and yes, we can support investors and insist on the rule of law in mitigating climate change and greenhouse emissions. Ladies and gentlemen, I invite you to express your gratitude to the two leaders of hope, for the region as well as for the respective nations. Thank you very much, Madam President.